The airport was a lively hub filled with the sounds of excitement, chatter, and the gentle hum of announcements echoing through the terminals. Travelers hurried to catch their flights, dragging suitcases behind them, while families greeted loved ones with warm hugs. Young children laughed and raced toward their gates, their little feet patting against the shiny tiled floors. The scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted from nearby cafes, mingling with the aroma of pretzels and hot dogs from food stands scattered throughout the airport. Security personnel moved swiftly among the crowds, scanning tickets and IDs with serious expressions. They watched for anything suspicious while maintaining order in what could easily turn chaotic. Uniformed officers spoke into radios, ensuring that everything ran smoothly under their watchful eyes. The bustle of people added to the sense of energy in the air, a feeling that anything could be happening at any moment. In this whirlwind of activity, an elderly woman stood out as a solitary figure amidst the chaos. Her silver hair, neatly pulled back into a bun, framed a face full of wisdom etched with deep lines that told stories of years gone by. She clutched her handbag tightly against her chest as if it held secrets too precious to lose. Though she appeared small and frail compared to those rushing around her, there was an undeniable spark in her eyes that suggested resilience. As she approached the security checkpoint, anxiety swept over her like a shadow. She had just stepped off a private flight and felt something vital slip from her grasp. Not just something material, but a piece of herself tied to memories and importance. As she spoke up about her lost item, pleading for someone to listen, she quickly realized how hard it was to capture attention in such a busy environment. "Excuse me," she said, raising her voice slightly above the din around her. "I left something very important on my flight." Her tone held urgency as she tried to make eye contact with one of the agents. But instead of engaging with her, two security officers shared amused glances, shaking their heads lightly while suppressing laughter. "Delusional," one muttered under his breath, loud enough for others nearby to hear. The elderly woman's heart sank as she felt dismissed by those who were supposed to keep everyone safe. She repeated herself, hoping they might understand, but her words fell on deaf ears. Security insisted on keeping things orderly and moving. They seemed more interested in ridiculing her than helping solve a problem that truly mattered to her. Before she knew it, they were escorting her away from the bustling terminal where applause and laughter filled the space more than questions and concern for an elderly woman who clearly needed assistance. The crowd paused in their tracks. Some glanced at each other bewildered, while others simply continued on with their day, as if such occurrences were normal at busy airports. Once outside on the curb, left alone except for the muted sounds of traffic nearby, she took a deep breath to steady herself. Her heart raced not from fear but from determination and calm acceptance of what needed to happen next. In all those moments leading up until now, she had already resolved not just to make another attempt but to reclaim what had been disregarded with such ease by those who hadn't even stopped to listen. With steady hands that still held strength despite age, she pulled out her phone and dialed a number that brought back memories of better days. A number that tied back to power and authority long forgotten by many in this busy airport's operations. As she waited for someone on the other end to pick up, an unexpected hush filled the air, as if nature itself sensed an important shift occurring just beyond perception. A sudden alert flared across digital screens displaying arrival times. Air traffic was halting inexplicably. The atmosphere shifted. Travelers began murmuring nervously amongst themselves as planes perched ready for takeoff remained grounded. Moments later, thick military vehicles rolled into view one after another. Sharp uniforms contrasted against cheerful luggage carts, making rounds through gate areas carrying promises of adventure now suddenly halted right alongside them. In hushed awe and perhaps fear, the crowd stepped back and stared. Gazes shifted toward the determined woman, making her presence known once more as changes were about to unfold before each pair of wide eyes aching for understanding in light of amazing revelations yet unnamed ahead. Amid the fast-paced chaos of the airport, the elderly woman stood with a quiet strength that contrasted sharply with the hurried crowd around her. She appeared small and fragile, her silver hair neatly arranged in a bun, secured with care as if it were a crown. Her deep-set eyes, however, glimmered with resilience and determination, revealing a spirit that had weathered many storms. dressed in a tailored coat that hung just below her knees and a soft scarf wrapped snugly around her neck. She exuded an air of dignity. With each passing minute, anxiety twisted in her chest like a tight knot. The important item she had left behind on the private flight felt like a lifeline to memories she cherished. As she clutched her handbag, a worn leather piece that held stories of its own, she took deliberate breaths to steady herself. She knew how vital it was to get help. Time was ticking away, and this wasn't just about keeping track of belongings. It was about reclaiming something lost that mattered deeply to her. Summoning courage, she approached the nearest security checkpoint despite the dismissive chatter and laughter bubbling around her. "Excuse me," she called out gently but firmly, trying to rise above the din of voices and announcements. "I need assistance. I left something very important on my flight." Her voice was laced with urgency as she tried to make eye contact with one of the heavily uniformed officers. The officer at the front glanced up momentarily but seemed more interested in maintaining his casual conversation with a colleague than addressing her plea for help. Their laughter echoed harshly in her ears, stinging more than she anticipated. Not ready to back down, she took a step closer, hoping for at least acknowledgement from someone who could help. "Please," she repeated, this time raising her voice slightly to cut through their banter. "I really need someone to listen." Instead of providing assistance, two security guards exchanged amused glances as one of them rolled his eyes and muttered under his breath, "What's this?" "Another delusional old lady." His words sliced through the air like ice, a reminder that not everyone saw value in human stories or understood the weight they might carry. The elderly woman felt her heart sink at their mockery. It was as if they didn't see her as an individual but merely as an inconvenience among other busier travelers. She brushed aside their laughter and focused on explaining once more what happened on the flight, the precious item that slipped from her possession, a family heirloom filled with sentimentality. But again, her words were met with indifference. One security officer waved his hand dismissively, indicating for her to move along while he continued organizing luggage nearby. Frustration bubbled within her, but she refused to let it spill over into anger. Instead, she attempted one last time to convey the importance of what lay lost. "Please," she insisted quietly now, standing tall despite feeling belittled by their behavior. "It's not just something material. It has not just value but also memories tied to my late husband." For a brief second, their expressions shifted slightly. Perhaps regret flickered behind their eyes. But before anything could change in their demeanor, they returned swiftly to their previous interactions and soon turned their backs toward her entirely. The moment felt heavy as she stood alone amid vibrant movement. As they forcibly escorted her away from the checkpoint and toward the exit, a parting marked by chuckles from those who had witnessed, it solidified an unsettling sense of isolation around her being cast aside like unwanted baggage. Outside on the curb away from prying eyes and judgmental stares, she felt both relieved and determined. An unexpected resolve washed over her instead of sorrow or anger. Alone yet unbroken beneath muted street sounds nearby, she closed her eyes for just a heartbeat longer than necessary. It was time to act decisively. This was not how things were going to end. With steady hands clasping around her phone, a device connecting past lives filled with vibrant experiences, she began dialing numbers tied closely back home. Fragile cords connected powerfully back into realms once familiar, yet somehow distant due time. As silence enveloped her surroundings momentarily while waiting for someone on the other side of the line answer's ring, a sudden falling hush fell upon travelers nearby who sensed something extraordinary brewing just out of sight, like brewing storm clouds gathering strength before unleashing rain upon weary earth below. So much larger forces were set into motion just beyond anyone's view, waiting only for moments before catching all attention unexpectedly. With her heart racing, the elderly woman stepped closer to the security checkpoint, determined to make herself heard amidst the noise of the airport. Her mind raced with memories of what she had left behind on that private flight, a delicate locket that had belonged to her late husband, filled with tiny photos of their happiest moments together. It was more than just an item. It was a piece of her history, a tangible reminder of love and cherished memories that she could not afford to lose. "Excuse me," she said again, her voice steady but laced with urgency as she tried to capture their attention. "I left something very important on my flight. It's a family heirloom, and I really need your help to retrieve it." She held her breath, hoping for a glimmer of understanding in their eyes. Instead, the two security officers exchanged smirks. One rolled his eyes dramatically while the other leaned in toward his partner, whispering something that made them both chuckle. "Here we go again. Another delusional old lady thinking someone cares about her little trinkets." One of them muttered loudly enough for her to hear. The laughter stung more than she expected. It felt like a sharp knife cutting through her dignity. "Please," she insisted, her voice rising slightly above the din. "This isn't just any trinket. It holds my late husband's pictures inside. It's irreplaceable." She tried to appeal to their sense of decency, searching for any sign that they understood her plight. But their expressions remained unchanged, unmoved by her words and seemingly unaffected by the emotional weight behind them. "You're wasting our time, ma'am," one officer replied dismissively, while waving his hand like she was an annoying fly buzzing around his head. "We have real work to do." Frustration boiled within her as she struggled to keep calm. How could they not see? This wasn't merely about misplaced belongings. This was about respect for memories and the stories that shaped lives. With each dismissive glance from the guards, she felt smaller and more invisible amidst the bustling crowd. "Please," she continued, her voice now tinged with desperation. "I left it on the plane. You must understand how important this is." Her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together in front of her, hoping someone might recognize the sincerity in her eyes. But all she received was a condescending look from one of the officers as he leaned back against the counter with an air of superiority. "Listen, lady, if you think we're going to stop everything for a little bauble, you're out of your mind. We've got flights to manage and people to help who actually need it." The weight of his words struck hard like a thunderclap. She could feel humiliation creeping into her cheeks as the laughter from those around her swelled in response. A few passers-by glanced over, some shaking their heads knowingly while others simply turned away. The young travelers who once rushed past now slowed down just enough to witness what felt like an unwarranted spectacle. Her pleas dismissed so readily. As they began to escort her toward the exit, she felt hopelessness enveloping her like a heavy cloak. They were treating her like an inconvenience rather than a person deserving of compassion and assistance. Each step away from the checkpoint deepened her sense of isolation. It felt surreal to be so disregarded in a place filled with so many people going about their lives. No, this couldn't be how it ended for her and that precious locket. This was not just some lost object. It represented love and memories that should never be forgotten or mocked. As they pushed her out into the bright sunlight outside the terminal doors, she took a deep breath to steady herself against the tide of emotions threatening to sweep her away. It was time to change tactics. Perhaps if they wouldn't listen on site, maybe someone would hear her elsewhere. With renewed resolve bubbling inside her chest, she reached into her handbag where a small phone lay nestled among tangled items. A connection back home and beyond into lines of power, once intertwined with family legacies long kept hidden. She pulled it out with steady hands despite feeling disheartened moments earlier. Dialing numbers connected more than just voices. They tied back into realms known yet dormant over years lost in shadows cast by time passing swiftly. She needed action now. As she waited for someone on the other end of the line to pick up amidst muted street sounds around, an unexpected hush blanketed those waiting in line nearby. Curiosity replaced concern as eyes shifted toward this determined woman, whose resolve seemed unwavering despite everything she'd already faced alone earlier inside those busy walls. Something larger loomed just beyond sight. A storm brewing not only in weather but within connections waiting patiently for recognition long denied. As the elderly woman stood at the security checkpoint, her heart sank with each mocking remark from the guards. She had hoped to receive compassion and assistance, but instead, she felt the weight of their disdain bearing down on her. Just as she gathered enough courage to call for help one more time, the situation escalated dramatically. Without warning, the two officers approached her with firm grips on her arms. "We don't have time for this nonsense," one of them said bluntly, his tone dripping with impatience. The elderly woman blinked in confusion, momentarily paralyzed by their sudden aggression. "Come on, let's get you out of here." "Wait, please," she pleaded, trying to maintain her dignity as they pulled her toward the exit. "You don't understand. It's not just a trinket. It holds memories of my late husband." Her voice cracked under pressure, desperation bubbling to the surface. The crowd around them began to take notice as word spread that something unusual was happening. Travelers paused mid-step, their laughter and chatter fading into murmurs of disbelief as they watched this scene unfold before them. A frail woman being escorted away from the bustling terminal like a criminal. Some onlookers exchanged worried glances while others simply stood frozen in shock. Groups of families and solo travelers alike turned to watch as she struggled against the grip of those who were supposed to protect everyone. A few sympathetic souls shook their heads. They couldn't believe this was happening in front of them. As the officers moved her closer to the exit door, one bystander found their voice and shouted, "Hey, what's going on? Why are you treating her like this?" The remark cut through the murmur of confusion and brought renewed attention to the unfolding situation. More curious eyes turned toward them. Some people pulled out their phones ready to record what they saw. The second officer glanced back at the crowd, rolling his eyes again as he tried to dismiss the growing unrest forming around them. "Just an old lady causing trouble," he called out dismissively, attempting to downplay their harsh treatment while keeping a firm hold on her arm. "Trouble? She's trying to get help." Another voice chimed in, echoing the frustrations bubbling within those witnessing this unjust scene. A ripple of support seemed to break through. Strangers united in disbelief over how an elderly woman had been treated with such disdain at a bustling airport. The tension mounted as more people began voicing their disapproval. "Let her go!" shouted a young man clutching his backpack tightly, standing up for someone he recognized was vulnerable. An older woman nearby added her voice hesitantly but firmly, "Please treat her with respect." Amidst all these voices rising up around them, the elderly woman felt a flicker of hope ignite within her chest despite feeling trapped between helplessness and humiliation just moments before. Perhaps there were still those who believed in kindness even in situations that seemed unfair. Catching fragments of supportive comments filtering through, their empathy wrapping around her like a warm embrace, she found strength deep within herself once more. Perhaps there was something larger at play here that would shift how people looked upon not just herself but elders like her across busy terminals everywhere. With renewed spirit ignited by public attention drawn into this strange episode, she took a deep breath and focused on that connection she had begun forging through phone calls just moments before being whisked away from potential help inside. Emboldened by shared determination rippling through the crowd growing bolder behind her now calling refrains against injustice, the elderly woman suddenly looked directly at one officer holding onto her tightly, his confidence showing cracks under pressure building around him in this unexpected arena of protest. "Do you realize who I am?" she said suddenly, letting conviction seep into every word as if it could reach all those watching yet also strike true where it counted most, with him standing directly in front. The incredulous looks exchanged between passengers ignited sparks quickly fanned into flames. Curiosity compelling movement toward public acknowledgement pushed fear aside for compassion stepping forward instead. For an instant all else faded. The clangor of announcements fell silent as unyielding stares settled upon security personnel, caught unprepared facing something they hadn't anticipated unfolding unexpectedly before their very eyes. Stepping outside the airport, the elderly woman was met with a rush of fresh air that felt like a breath of freedom, but her heart still pounded in her chest. As she settled onto the curb, away from the noise and chaos inside, she took a moment to collect her thoughts. The sounds of bustling travelers faded behind her, replaced by the faint hum of distant engines and the chirping of birds flitting about. She pulled out her phone with steady hands, determined to connect with someone who could help her reclaim what was lost. The small device seemed like a lifeline, her connection to a world where she was valued and heard. As her fingers danced across the screen, she could hear hushed voices nearby. Onlookers had gathered to gossip about her earlier ordeal. "Can you believe how they treated her?" one voice said incredulously. "What kind of airport treats an elderly woman like that?" Another voice chimed in. "I thought we were supposed to respect our elders. That was just awful." Their words flowed around her like gentle waves, carrying hints of support that warmed her spirit. While they murmured amongst themselves, she focused on dialing a number that had been imprinted in her memory for years, the contact who could change everything. The urgency of the situation washed over her. She needed to reach someone who understood the significance of her family legacy and could act swiftly. She pressed the call button and waited as the phone rang. In the background, snippets of conversation floated through the air like confetti. "Did you see how they laughed at her?" a young woman exclaimed, shaking her head in disbelief. "It's unbelievable they didn't help her," another added sympathetically. The elderly woman listened intently while waiting for an answer on the line. Her resolve strengthened with each supportive word shared between bystanders nearby. Perhaps this was a turning point, not only for herself but for others who felt silenced or disrespected. Suddenly, there was a click on the other end. "Hello?" A voice crackled through the receiver, familiar yet distant. It was someone she had trusted for years, someone who still held power within the airport's controlling trust. "Hello, it's me," she said with a calm confidence that belied the tumultuous emotions swirling within her. "I need your help urgently." As she spoke, she could feel eyes from the crowd turning toward her. Whispers faded into silence, and even those chatting amongst themselves now seemed to be hanging on her words. They watched this once frail woman suddenly take charge of her narrative, transforming from a victim into an authority figure ready to reclaim what was hers. "Listen carefully," she continued, sharing details about what had transpired inside. The mocking laughter, the dismissal by security personnel, and most importantly, the heirloom that held fragments of her past. "It's not just about me. It's about standing up for all those who are dismissed without being heard." Her words resonated with those around her. They could see a fierce determination sparking within her deeper than anyone had expected. As she recounted how unacceptable it was to treat anyone, especially an elderly person, with such disdain, heads nodded in agreement among the crowd. On cue, as if sensing the rising tension and unity forming outside, something larger began to unfold within the airport itself. Travelers turned their attention back toward the terminal doors as murmurs became louder. Rumors began circulating about why there seemed to be an unusual pause in air traffic. Minutes ticked by slowly as people exchanged glances filled with curiosity and anticipation. Suddenly, without warning, sirens wailed in the distance, a sound that pierced through them like lightning illuminating a darkened sky. Several military vehicles appeared just beyond the curb where she sat confidently making her call. Their imposing presence sent ripple effects through both supporters and skeptics alike among those observing from various angles. The elderly woman took note of it all, the dramatic shift in atmosphere as curious passengers turned toward their new reality unfolding right before their eyes. She felt their collective energy begin to swell behind her. A wave built from disbelief slowly morphing into awe and respect for someone they had underestimated just moments before. "Thank you," she concluded on the phone call firmly but kindly as she prepared to hang up. "It's time for change." With renewed spirit washing over both herself and everyone watching nearby, she stood tall, ready to face whatever came next, armed with newfound confidence buoyed by solidarity striking deep roots into this busy airport's heart. As the elderly woman concluded her phone call, a sudden hush fell over the airport. It was as if the very air had thickened with anticipation, and the lively chatter that usually filled the terminals gave way to an uneasy silence. Travelers looked around, puzzled by the abrupt change in atmosphere. Something felt different, almost electric, as though they sensed a storm brewing just beyond their sight. In the distance, an announcement cut through the stillness, crackling over the intercom with an urgency that set everyone on edge. "Attention all passengers. Due to unforeseen circumstances, all air traffic has been halted until further notice." The announcement echoed ominously, sending ripples of confusion through the crowd. "What's going on?" someone muttered nervously as travelers exchanged wary glances. The vibrant buzz of excitement and anticipation for upcoming flights evaporated like morning dew in the sun. Children who had been bouncing on their toes, excitedly waiting to board their flights, fell quiet, looking to their parents for answers. Outside on the curb, The elderly woman noticed how people began to congregate near the windows of the terminal, staring intently at planes that had been preparing for takeoff just moments ago now grounded on the tarmac. A sense of disbelief washed over them. Emotions ranged from curiosity to concern as they tried to piece together what had just transpired. As she stood there watching, her heart racing not just from anxiety but also from empowerment, she couldn't help but feel a shift happening not only within herself but also among all those gathered nearby. It was as if her earlier words were echoing in their minds and creating a sense of unity among strangers who had once rushed past each other with little thought. Then came further announcements from airport staff scrambling to figure out what was happening. Voices crackled over loudspeakers, but confusion reigned supreme as they struggled to maintain order amidst rising tension. "Please remain calm and await further instructions," one voice urged with an attempt at reassurance that fell flat against mounting apprehension. The elderly woman felt a swell of determination rise within her as she observed what she had inadvertently set into motion. It wasn't merely about retrieving her heirloom anymore. It was about something larger, about standing up against injustices faced by those overlooked or dismissed by authority figures without a second thought. Around her, whispers turned into conversations buzzing with speculation. "Why would air traffic stop like this?" asked one traveler with brows knit in confusion. "Could it be because of what happened with that lady?" Another responded quietly, casting a glance in her direction. The realization that she might indeed be at the center of this unexpected disruption began to dawn on everyone. And then it happened. Military vehicles rolled into view beyond the terminal as sirens wailed in the distance. Their imposing presence sent a wave of shock rippling through those gathered outside. The collective gazes fixed upon this new development transformed bewilderment into awe and growing concern for what might come next. The elderly woman stood tall as she observed this development unfold. A feeling akin to empowerment surged through her veins as she witnessed people rallying around her cause without even realizing it yet. It was no longer just about her personal loss. It became a statement about respect for every individual story being worth listening to, even those who appeared frail or vulnerable. While some travelers moved closer toward windows bustling with curiosity, others remained rooted where they stood outside in solidarity, with her unyielding spirit, surrounded by uncertainty, now swirling around them like leaves caught in a gusty wind. "Whatever is happening," she thought to herself resolutely, "this is my moment." She took a deep breath and projected calmness despite unsure flashes darting across faces around her. All craving clarity amidst chaos brewing both inside and outside these walls. With newfound confidence igniting within her heart, she prepared for whatever would follow next. The pivotal moment that could bring change not only for herself but spark recognition across this busy airport where stories too often went unheard. As the elderly woman stood still, heart racing with a mix of anxiety and determination, a deafening sound pierced through the murmurs of the crowd. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. The atmosphere shifted dramatically as several military vehicles rolled into view just beyond the airport's entrance. Their sleek, armored exteriors gleamed ominously in the sunlight, drawing gasps from those gathered outside. Travelers who had been caught up in their own worries now turned their heads toward this unexpected spectacle. Curiosity rippled through the crowd like a wave. People began to inch closer to get a better look at what was happening. Whispers filled the air as speculation grew about why armed forces were deploying at the airport. "Is that military?" one young man asked his companion, eyes wide with disbelief. "What could possibly be going on?" "I don't know," she replied, shaking her head as they pushed forward for a clearer view. "I just hope everyone is okay." The elderly woman watched as military personnel spilled out of the vehicles, their uniforms crisp and serious. Each officer moved with purpose, equipped with gear that signaled their readiness for any situation. It all felt surreal. Moments ago, she had been an elderly woman seeking help in a chaotic environment, and now she was witnessing an operation unfold that seemed almost cinematic. As soldiers began coordinating with airport staff members who looked equally flustered and uncertain, tensions continued to rise among onlookers. Some passengers nearby took out their phones to capture images or video. This was not something anyone could have anticipated during what began as just another busy day at the airport. Why are they here? Someone shouted from the back of the crowd as intrigued travelers craned their necks for answers. With every passing moment, it became increasingly clear that everyone sensed significance behind this curious arrival. The elderly woman felt both a stirring of excitement and responsibility wash over her. People were beginning to pay attention, really pay attention, just as she hoped they would when she made that phone call moments earlier. This wasn't merely about her lost heirloom any longer. It had transcended into something more significant, the recognition of dignity and respect for every individual story being told loudly against injustice. A soldier walked toward a group of airport officials standing baffled near the entrance, signing off with quick hand signals causing chaos behind him. A request for immediate updates on status quaked lightly within collected breaths among those present. The elderly woman shifted her weight slightly as tension permeated around her like an electric charge that snapped at invisible threads connecting each person through shared energy rising into something tangible. She caught bits of conversation unfolding around her, the murmurs shifting into questions about protocol and safety measures alongside uproarious curiosity regarding who had initiated this level of response today. "I heard it has to do with what happened earlier," yelled a man near one window where employees leaned closer trying to capture every detail unfolding live at this moment. Suddenly, attention turned back toward the elderly woman, a realization dawning upon those gathered. She might hold significance in how events had transpired since being booted out so unceremoniously by security only some minutes ago. With newfound confidence glowing inside her chest igniting against rising uncertainty hovering overhead following dramatic military presence. A determination flickered stronger than before. They would come together united, not simply passively witnessing but actively claiming change after a relentless battle fought very much out loud today. Taking a deep breath, steadying herself while wrapping words held closely throughout unfortunate sequences thus far, the elderly woman stepped forward into increased visibility, keenly aware now how everyone's focus awaited clarity bubbling within even hesitant hearts lingering nearby, gasping collective breaths, yearning a new possibility bursting ahead, waiting behind these great walls where stories too often overlooked evolve, majestically awaiting evolution, enabling lights illuminating even darkest nights across airways, flooding alive overall. "This isn't just my fight now," she thought resolutely. Locking eyes with one concerned passerby, holding eye contact, relieved somehow, hoping for transformations soon ahead, and without wavering called forth strength enveloping those against vulnerabilities, once unrecognized, reaching deeply still standing proud, feeling embers growing bright enough, seeing change imminently, pressed forward, breaking each spark, igniting wisdom woven once lost yet eternally shining onward, replaced by love known freely. Above clouds high, pacing gloriously, new dawn lingered softly, instilling hope, proudly awakening all present, waiting only, cascading down, resurrected. As the chaos continued to unfold around her, the elderly woman watched in astonishment as military personnel coordinated with airport officials, their movements fluid and purposeful. Just moments ago, she had been an object of ridicule, an elderly woman dismissed by security. Now she was at the center of an unexpected storm that had captured the attention of everyone around her. She could feel the shifting tides of perception. Where once there had been laughter, now there existed curiosity and respect. In this pivotal moment, a figure stepped forward from the group of military personnel and approached her with a knowing expression. It was clear this man held authority, his uniform crisp and insignia gleaming in the sunlight. He seemed to recognize her immediately, and a flicker of surprise crossed his face. "Ma'am," he began, his voice carrying a tone of genuine respect. "We have received information regarding your situation. I understand you were trying to retrieve something important." The crowd fell silent as they absorbed his words, tension crackling in the air. The elderly woman felt her heart race anew. Was it possible they knew more than she anticipated? "Yes, I left a family heirloom on board a private flight," she replied, her voice steadier than she expected. "But it's not just about the locket. It's about how I was treated earlier." The officer nodded solemnly. "I understand. You are more than just an ordinary traveler here today." He glanced toward the gathered crowd, who listened intently. "You are the widow of Charles Henderson, the original founder of this airport." Gasps rippled through those assembled. Whispers surged like wildfire as people processed this shocking revelation. "Is that true?" someone murmured from nearby. I didn't know. Overwhelmed by the sudden recognition, the elderly woman straightened her posture, feeling a swell of pride overcome her initial embarrassment. Yes, she was indeed Charles Henderson's widow, the woman behind the legacy that had made this bustling airport possible. She wasn't just anyone. She had vital authority over decisions made regarding operations through a controlling trust established long ago. Your husband worked tirelessly to ensure this airport served everyone, the military officer continued, meeting her gaze with sincerity. We want to honor that legacy and ensure your voice is heard today. With each word spoken by the officer, a wave of support began to wash over her. A collective understanding among onlookers who now saw her as more than a frail figure facing unjust treatment. They recognized her strength and importance within the fabric of their shared environment. The elderly woman stepped forward slightly, encouraged by newfound confidence bolstered by collective energy surging around her. It's imperative we treat everyone with dignity, she declared clearly, addressing both the military officer and the audience present. I will not stand silently while individuals are mocked or dismissed, especially those who are vulnerable. Nods rippled through the crowd as people responded positively to her words, their expressions shifting from shock to admiration. The elderly woman could see others now reflecting her determination. Something authentic had sparked between them all, a unity born from a collective desire for change. The military officer gestured for silence while signaling behind him, an indication that they would be moving forward with arrangements to secure air traffic and determine next steps collaboratively. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, he said earnestly. We will rectify what has happened here today. As conversations flowed through the crowd about how best to support those who had suffered disrespect or injustice in any form from any authority figures going forward, there was palpable excitement about instilling new policies aimed at protecting vulnerable passengers arriving daily. Together, she proclaimed passionately, we can ensure that every individual, regardless of age or background, is treated with kindness and respect throughout our shared space. Her words resonated deeply among travelers who lingered closer now, energized by hope rather than uncertainty, as they witnessed this powerful transformation unfolding before their eyes. In that crowded airport filled once more with buzzing conversations solely focused on positive change expanding outward, it became evident that just one voice raised high enough had prompted movement beyond expectations. The elderly woman smiled softly, while embracing clarity enveloping them all amid intense circumstances altering perceptions, alongside possibilities, blossoming brightly ahead. The atmosphere in the airport was electric, charged with anticipation and curiosity, as the elderly woman stood confidently before the crowd. Her revelation as the widow of the airport's founder had shifted the tide dramatically. She was no longer just an overlooked traveler, but a figure of respect and authority. The murmurs among spectators turned into excited discussions, and eyes began to turn toward the airport management as they realized the implications of her status. In stark contrast to the support surrounding her, members of airport management were scrambling to respond. The airport director, a man who had previously dismissed the elderly woman's pleas, now faced a crisis unlike any he had encountered before. His demeanor shifted from arrogance to unease as he watched events unfold from a distance, his mind racing at the possibilities that lay ahead. Get me updates on what's happening, he barked at his staff, his voice tinged with panic. We need to control this situation before it spirals out of our hands. But it was already too late. The atmosphere had changed irrevocably. Travelers who had witnessed the initial incident with the elderly woman were now actively advocating for her. They pointed fingers in disbelief and whispered fervently about how poorly she had been treated by security earlier that day. The military officer stepped forward again, addressing both the crowd and airport officials. We will be launching an immediate investigation into this matter, he stated firmly, his voice carrying authority that silenced even the loudest murmurs. The treatment of vulnerable passengers will not be tolerated, and we expect your full cooperation. With those words, the tide turned sharply against the airport's administration, particularly against its director. The realization began to dawn on everyone present. Accountability was coming swiftly, and those in charge would have to reckon with their actions. The crowd collectively turned their attention toward the director, who shifted uncomfortably under their scrutiny. With whispers growing louder and more insistent, it became clear that people were no longer willing to accept disrespect or negligence from those meant to keep them safe. Just then, an unexpected commotion erupted at the entrance where another military personnel approached the director directly. "You're going to need to come with us?" he said bluntly, causing gasps to ripple through the audience as they realized what was happening. "What? You can't do this!" the director protested, his voice filled with disbelief and desperation. "I have done everything right. This is ridiculous." But his protests fell on deaf ears as the officers escorted him away from the scene, leaving onlookers stunned in silence at witnessing such decisive action unfold right before their eyes. The elderly woman watched all of this transpire with a mix of emotions. Relief intermingled with disbelief that her earlier humiliation could lead to such a significant shift in power dynamics within the airport. She felt a sense of justice blooming as passengers exchanged glances filled with hope rather than despair. "Change is coming!" someone shouted from the back of the crowd, igniting a wave of agreement that swept through those assembled like wildfire. People began clapping and cheering for what felt like a monumental victory, not just for one elderly woman but for everyone who had ever been dismissed or belittled in their own lives. "Make sure new policies are established to protect vulnerable passengers," another voice chimed in, rallying others around him as they began discussing practical measures that could ensure respectful treatment going forward. As conversations buzzed around her about safety regulations and procedures for addressing grievances, the elderly woman felt her heart swell with pride. She had spoken up when it mattered most and, in doing so, had ignited a movement that promised real change within this bustling hub. "We will make sure our stories are heard," she proclaimed again, emboldened by collective determination radiating outward from her newfound supporters. The elderly woman recognized that it wasn't merely about reclaiming her lost heirloom anymore. It had transformed into something far deeper, a collective cry for justice resonating through every corner of their shared space. As she looked out over the crowd, faces lit up with excitement and purpose. The once busy airport now pulsated with renewed energy filled not just with travelers rushing to catch flights, but people ready to advocate for each other's dignity and respect. A new chapter was unfolding, one that would ensure stories like hers would never again be overlooked or dismissed lightly. As the dust settled from the whirlwind of events at the airport, the atmosphere transformed once more. The elderly woman, now recognized as an authority figure, stood with a newfound sense of purpose. She had emerged from a challenging ordeal not only with her dignity restored, but also with a commitment to foster positive change for others who might find themselves in similar situations. After the abrupt dismissal of the airport director, she gathered airport management and military personnel in a meeting room set aside for crisis discussions. The walls seemed to echo with anticipation as representatives from various departments took their seats, their expressions a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice steady and authoritative. "Today has shown us that we have serious issues within our airport that need immediate attention. We cannot afford to ignore the dignity and respect every traveler deserves, especially our elderly and vulnerable passengers." With each word spoken, the room fell into a hushed silence. It was clear her presence commanded respect. The once ridiculed woman was now leading a pivotal discussion that would shape policies moving forward. She glanced around the table, gauging reactions as she continued. "It is imperative that we establish new protocols to protect passengers from mistreatment," she asserted, her eyes locking onto those of the airport officials. "We need to ensure that security personnel are trained not only to enforce rules, but also to approach situations with compassion and understanding." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group as the elderly woman presented her proposals. She outlined specific policies aimed at addressing the needs of vulnerable travelers, emphasizing sensitivity training for all staff members, a clear process for reporting mistreatment, and established channels for feedback from passengers. "We must create an environment where everyone feels safe and valued," she insisted. "No one should ever feel like their concerns are dismissed or ridiculed again." As she spoke, several airport officials scribbled notes furiously, while others nodded in agreement. The realization dawned on them. This was not merely about improving customer service. It was about fostering a culture of respect that would define their airport's legacy. In response to her proposals, one of the senior managers raised a hand tentatively. "You're right," he said slowly. "We've been so focused on operations that we've forgotten the human aspect of what we do here." His admission brought a wave of nodding heads around the table. Another official chimed in, "We need to act swiftly. If we can turn this situation into an opportunity for growth, we can rebuild trust with our passengers." The elderly woman felt encouraged by this collaboration. She could sense the momentum building in support of her vision. "Let's put these new policies into practice immediately," she urged passionately. "And I want to establish a committee that includes representatives from various backgrounds, travelers, advocates for seniors, and those who understand the challenges faced by vulnerable individuals." Excitement began to fill the room as ideas flowed freely. Suggestions came forth about how best to implement these policies effectively. Perhaps even hosting community forums would allow passengers to share their experiences directly, providing invaluable insights. Within minutes, the conversation shifted from fear and uncertainty to determination and hope as they discussed how they could transform their airport into a welcoming space for everyone. The elderly woman felt empowered, watching as newly formed alliances sparked enthusiasm among those present. Finally, after hours of discussion and planning, they reached a consensus on next steps forward. The framework that would guide their operations through this remarkable transformation was set in motion. As she stepped out of the meeting room, the elderly woman felt invincible. It was more than just an achievement for herself. It was about creating lasting change that would benefit countless others who passed through those airport doors each day. With renewed vigor and excitement coursing through her veins, she glanced around at the bustling terminal filled with travelers rushing to catch flights. This place, once a site of humiliation, had now become a beacon of hope for countless individuals seeking understanding and respect during their journeys. She took a deep breath, heart swelling with pride. Today marked not just her victory but the beginning of a broader movement, one that ensured every story would be heard and every person treated with dignity within those busy walls forevermore. As the final hints of commotion settled in the airport, and the elderly woman stood in her newfound role of authority, a reflective silence enveloped the terminal. The air was thick with a profound sense of change, not only in policy but in collective consciousness. The events of the day had served as an eye-opener, illuminating the complex layers of respect and dignity often taken for granted in society, especially toward vulnerable individuals. While the crowd dispersed slowly, some passengers lingering to discuss what had transpired and share their support for the elderly woman, a spark ignited within her. Today was about more than just reclaiming a precious heirloom. It was about changing perceptions and challenging the status quo. She understood that appearances can be deceiving. This chaotic day had begun with her being viewed as nothing more than an old lady with a pitiful tale to share, and it transformed into a rallying call for respect that echoed throughout the airport. This pivotal experience encapsulated many lessons. It served as a reminder that every individual carries stories worthy of acknowledgement and respect. An elderly woman, once considered irrelevant in a high-paced environment, became instrumental in bringing forth change that would resonate deeply within the walls of this bustling hub. As she made her way through the airport, exchanging smiles and nods with those who had been rallying behind her just moments before, she came to appreciate the transformative power of community. People who previously rushed by each other without a glance had now united under a shared understanding that everyone deserves compassion regardless of age or social status. It wasn't just travelers waiting for their flights. It was individuals carrying experiences and challenges deserving of recognition. The elderly woman stopped at a large window overlooking the runway where planes continued to navigate the skies above, a symbol of freedom and connection. She reflected on how easily people can overlook each other amidst the deafening noise of everyday life, where efficiency often trumps empathy and kindness. As she took a deep breath, absorbing the energy around her, she realized this journey wasn't solely hers. It belonged to all those who had endured neglect or disrespect while quietly navigating their paths through life. Her heart swelled with purpose as she thought about those stories, the silent struggles that need light shone upon them in moments that often feel insignificant. Let today mark the beginning, she whispered to herself, a mantra for the change she hoped to foster within not just this airport but everywhere people interacted, whether in transit or day-to-day life. The fight for recognition wasn't just isolated to aging individuals but extended toward any marginalized group, continuously striving for respect amid an ever-quickening world. Reveling in possibilities ahead, while walking among passionate discussions about implementing new policies, she smiled at those welcoming her into their conversations. Her vision for an inclusive environment echoed exuberantly, as ideas sprang forth discussing workshops designed to train employees in emotional intelligence and sensitivity, the commitment to ensuring that every traveler walks through these doors feeling cherished rather than dismissed. With each step forward among her supporters, she felt hope for younger generations who would inherit this space. A foundational shift inspired by collective voices demanding change now woven into its very essence. As she prepared to head home, her heart beat steady with anticipation. It wasn't just about one person overcoming adversity. It was about securing a future built on compassion and understanding that would forever transform interactions within bustling airports across cities everywhere. The elderly woman turned back one last time before exiting, gazing out onto the runway where new possibilities awaited. The journey they'd embarked upon together would empower countless others beyond their present moment, a legacy assuring everyone's stories would continue demanding respect, therefore creating a world richer in human experience defined by shared dignity and authentic compassion. Emboldened by this promise of change heralding from beneath familiar skies above, she stepped away from the airport, grounding herself firmly, ready to face tomorrow renewed with strength tempered through every voice finally heard.